So welcome to our presentation on different culture systems used in aquaculture. Today, we'll explore the various methods for cultivating marine and freshwater species, comparing their advantages and disadvantages, and helping you choose the best system for specific conditions and economic considerations. So for our objectives, you have first the name and describe each of the culture systems and methods of culture. Second, compare one culture method to the others. And third, we have identified the best method of culture applicable or adaptable to certain condition and or in terms of applicability and economic considerations. So there are four primary culture systems commonly used in aquaculture. We have the pond culture, raceway culture, cage or pen culture, and raft culture. Each has its unique characteristics and they are suited to different species and environment. So for the pond culture, we have pond culture is one of the most traditional and widely used systems. It's ideal for species like milkfish, shrimp, sea bass, siganid, and tilapia. This method involves raising aquatic organisms in large, confined water bodies that can be managed for water quality and environmental conditions. So we have for its advantages, we have the control over water quality. You can manage the water salinity, temperature, and oxygen levels. Second, we have the low initial investment. Compared to other systems, ponds can be relatively inexpensive to set up. And third, we have the suitable for various species. It works for both freshwater and marine species, providing flexibility in species selection. And for our disadvantages, we have the land intensive. Ponds require large areas of land. Second, we have the environmental impact. If not properly managed, nutrient buildup and waste can harm the surrounding ecosystem. Third, we have the high labor cost. Managing the pond and maintaining water quality can be labor intensive. For our second culture, we have the raceway culture. Raceway culture is a system that uses channels or long, narrow tanks where water is continuously flowing. It's suitable for species such as milkfish, grouper, sea bass, siganid, snapper, and tilapia. For its advantages, we have the efficient water use. Continuous water flow help maintain water quality and reduce the risk of disease buildup. Second, better control of growth conditions. Water flow helps regulate oxygen levels, making it easier to manage fish growth. Third is the less space required than ponds. Raceway are more compact and can be used in areas where land space is limited. For our disadvantages, we have first the higher setup cost. The infrastructure, including pumps and water treatment systems, can be costly. Second, we have the water source dependency, requires a constant supply of clean fresh water, which may not be available in all regions. And third, we have the maintenance challenges. Ensuring the continuous flow of water and monitoring systems can require significant attention and energy. For a third culture, we have the cage or pen culture. Cage and pen culture are used for species like milkfish, grouper, sea bass, siganid, snapper, and tilapia. In this system, fish are raised in cages or pens, placed in natural water bodies such as seas, lakes, or rivers. For our advantages, we have the efficient use of natural water bodies. By using existing bodies of water, this method doesn't require extensive land resources. Second, we have the scalability. Cages and pens can be expanded or relocated, making it a flexible option. Third, we have the reduced infrastructure cost. Compared to ponds or raceways, cages are relatively simple to set up and maintain. For our disadvantages, we have the exposure to environmental risk. Cages are susceptible to damage from storms or strong currents. Second, you have the water quality concerns. Fish in cages rely on surrounding water quality, which may not be always optimal. Third, we have the disease and parasite risk. Higher density of fish increases the likelihood of disease transmission, which can spread quickly in open water. For our last culture, we have the raft culture, where it is commonly used for growing mollusks like mussels and oysters. In this system, mollusks are cultured on ropes or nets that are suspended from floating rafts in coastal waters. For its advantages, we have first the minimal space requirements. Rafts take up relatively space compared to other systems and can be used in open water. Second, we have the low environmental impact. Since it doesn't require land, it's less disruptive to terrestrial ecosystems. Third, we have the cost effective. The setup is generally cheaper and less labor intensive compared to other systems like ponds or raceways. For our disadvantages, we have the vulnerability to weather. Rafts can be damaged by strong waves, storms, or other harsh conditions. Second, we have the limited to mollusk. This system is only suitable for species like mussels and oysters, which may limit its versatility. Potent for overcrowding. Overloading the raft can reduce water quality and impact the growth of rate of the organism. So to summarize, each culture system has its strengths and limitations. Pond culture is great for a wide range of species but requires a lot of space and management. Raceway culture is more water efficient and can provide better control over the environment, but it's costly to set up. Cage or pen culture offers flexibility and scalability but faces risk from environmental factors, while the raft culture is simple and low cost, but it's best suited for mollusks and can be vulnerable to elements. So, for the best system for you depends on your location, species, and economic considerations. By understanding the advantages and disadvantages of each method, you can make an informed decision and set the stage for a successful aquaculture operation.
So, methods of culture relative to species combination. So there are two types, monoculture, which is a single species, polyculture, which is two or more species. So in monoculture, either saline tilapia, milkfish, siganid, shrimp, prawn, or any other single species are included. In polyculture, shrimp and milkfish, which is the shrimp is main crop, milkfish is the janitor, then grouper, mud crab, and saline tilapia, where the grouper is main crop and the mud crab is the janitor. And tilapia provides fingerlings as food of the grouper and the same time as janitor fish. And then there is integrated farming, which is livestock plus fish or fish plus chicks. So in integrated farming, it is an agricultural management practice that combines various farming activities to enhance the productivity, sustainability, and resource efficiency. The primary goal of integrated farming is to create a more holistic approach to agriculture where different components such as crops, livestock, aquaculture, and agroforestry are interlinked to maximize the use of available resources and minimize waste and reduce environmental impacts. So integrated farming systems most likely includes the diversity between by incorporating multiple types of production. Then there is nutrient cycling, which involves recycling waste products from one component as inputs for another. For example, like livestock manure can be used as fertilizer for crops and crop residues can be fed to the animals. Then we have resource efficiency. By using resources such as land, water, and labor more efficiently, integrated farming can reduce costs and increase profitability for farmers. And then we have sustainability. Integrated farming promotes sustainable practices by minimizing environmental impact, conserving biodiversity, and improving soil health. Then, economic stability, which can provide farmers with diversified income sources, which can help stabilize their financial situation and reduce vulnerability to market fluctuations. Overall, integrated farming seeks to create a balanced ecosystem within agricultural practices that benefits both farmers and the environment.
Now let's discuss about the methods of culture relative to levels of production. We have here the following: extensive culture, modified extensive culture, intensive culture, and semi-intensive culture. These methods varies based on stocking density, feeding strategy, management intensity, and investment, and are essential in determining the efficiency, sustainability, and profitability of fish farming. Generally, we can categorize them into extensive and intensive, where intensive culture is suitable for commercial scale farming aiming for maximum yield and profit, but it requires high investment and management. Meanwhile, extensive culture is low cost and environmentally friendly, making it ideal for small scale, low maintenance farming. Let us first talk about extensive culture and modified extensive culture. And these two represents two approaches with distinct management and outcomes. First, in feeding approach, modified extensive culture supplements natural food with energy-rich feed, leading to better growth rates, while extensive culture relies entirely on natural food, making it more traditional and low-cost method. Second, in stocking density, modified extensive culture supports a higher density ranging from 4,000 to 6,000 bangus per hectare, allowing for increased production. Meanwhile, extensive culture keeps density lower, ranging from 2,000 to 3,000 bangus per hectare, reducing resource competition and the need for additional feed. In water depth, modified extensive culture maintains deeper water, ranging from 75 to 80 centimeter, providing a more stable environment. And extensive culture typically has shallower water with less than 50 centimeter, which can limit the fish growth potential. In terms of yield and investment, modified extensive culture achieves a slightly higher yield with 1,000 to 2,000 kilogram per hectare per crop for bangus, but requires more investment. In extensive culture, it has lower yields and with only 700 to 1,000 kilogram per hectare per crop for bangus. But in terms of cost effectivity, it is more efficient compared to modified extensive culture. So the choice between these systems depends on resource availability, investment capacity, and production goals. Modified extensive culture is suitable for farmers aiming for higher yields with moderate investment, while extensive culture is ideal for those prioritizing sustainability and lower input costs. Now let's proceed with intensive and semi-intensive culture, which also represent different approaches in aquaculture and with distinct management and outcomes. So the feeding strategy in semi-intensive culture uses a combination of natural food and protein-rich feed, reducing feed costs while supporting growth. Intensive culture depends entirely on formulated feeds, ensuring optimal nutrition but increasing operational expenses. Stocking density. Semi-intensive culture allows 8,000 to 12,000 bangus per hectare and 40,000 to 60,000 tilapia per hectare, balancing fish growth with available resources. For intensive culture, it supports the highest stocking densities with more than 15,000 bangus per hectare, while 70,000 to 100,000 tilapia per hectare. It maximizes the yield potential. In water depth, semi-intensive culture maintains water at 100 centimeter or more, providing adequate space for fish, while intensive culture requires more than 120 centimeter depth, ensuring optimal water quality and oxygenation for high-density stocking. Intensive in yield, semi-intensive culture requires moderate investment and yields 2,000 to 4,000 kg per hectare for bangus. Intensive culture involves very high investment, but the yield is significantly greater, reaching 4,000 to 12,000 kg per hectare per crop for bangus. Semi-intensive culture is suitable for farmers seeking moderate yields with lower feed costs. Intensive culture is best for those aiming for maximum production and profit but requires high investment and strict management. So the overall importance of the distinction of these methods in aquaculture is to help farmers select the best production strategy based on available resources, then balances sustainability, cost, and profit potential, and guides investment decisions in aquaculture businesses, and finally ensures efficient use of land and water resources while maximizing yield.
These slides shows the methods of culture relative to natural food. We have here the plankton method, the lab method, and the lumot method. Wherein the plankton method, where fish are reared with plankton as the principal food. So planktons are suspended microscopic plants and animals growing within the water column, most especially in the upper or surface layer. These natural food passively drift with or float in the water. Second is the lab method, where fish are reared with lab as the main source of food. So lab is an association of phytoplanktons. So phytoplanktons means they are microscopic planktons capable of photosynthesis. Zooplanktons, filamentous algae, and worms growing at the bottom surface of the pond. Since they grow at the bottom of the pond, and so they are called benthic algae. And lastly, the lumot. These lumot are filamentous grass-green algae that start to grow at the bottom surface of pond and continue to grow up to the surface of the water. This slide shows the examples relative to natural food. First, the plant or phyto. Phytocomponent of the plankton include the green algae, blue-green algae, diatoms, euglenoids, and dinoflagellates. Next is the plant component of the lab, and these are first, the diatoms. Example of these are Navicula, Mastogloria, Amphora, and Staurenis. And second, the blue-green algae. Example of these are Formidium, Spirulina, and Micrococcus. The animal components include the moina, daphnia, daphnia eggs, larvae or finfishes, crustaceans, mollusks, and insects. For the lumot, we have three kinds of lumot: the Ketamorphalinum, the unbranched filamentous grass-green algae; Cladophora, the branched filamentous grass-green algae; and Intermorpha intestinalis tubulosa, or we call this as bitukang manok. This is an alga which looks like a pancit when it is still young and which looks like an intestine of a fowl when it is in adult stages. So for your reference, this slide shows the picture of natural food. As you can see here, we have here the green algae, the daphnia, the Ketomorphalinum, blue-green algae, the lablab, the cladophora, diatoms, dinoflagellates, and lastly the Intermorpha intestinalis or the bitukang manok.
For this topic, it's all about methods of culture in relative to sex of fish. So let's focus on monosex culture. There are many types of monosex culture. There are monosexing, hybridization, sex reversal, genetic manipulation of sex, and triploidy method. What is monosex culture? So, this method involves rearing only female or male individuals to control the number of recruits, commonly used in tilapia species, particularly saline tilapia. So, this technique is commonly used for improved growth rates, prevent unwanted reproduction, and reduce competition. In many species, males or females grow faster or reach a more desirable size, making monosex culture beneficial for commercial farming. Methods to achieve monosex population include the sample I've said in the first slide, and example of species commonly for monosex, the tilapia, because where males are preferred due to their faster growth, and the freshwater prawns, where females are often excluded to reduce competition and cannibalism. Here are examples of different monosex culture methods used in aquaculture. First is the manual sexing, separating male tilapias from female tilapia. Male tilapias are the ones to be reared to large size or marketable size because they are relatively larger in size and grow faster than their female counterparts. Example of manual sexing. So the male tilapias are manually sorted by examining external genitalia or size differences. So the male tilapias are grown faster than females, only the male ones are selected for culture. This method is labor intensive and less effective for large scale operation. Next one is the hybridization. Is the crossing of two different species within the same genus. Example of hybridization in hybrid tilapia production. The Nile tilapia males are crossed with the blue tilapia females, resulting in offspring that are predominantly male up to 95%. These methods advantage of natural genetic factors that influence sex ratios. Third is the sex reversal or the hormonal treatment. It's the process of converting genetic female in tilapias into functional males. This method is carried out with swim up fry tilapia. During their totipotent stage, the sexual undifferentiation by feeding them with feed which is mixed with an androgen hormone and ethyl alcohol. Example of sex reversal in commercial tilapia hatcheries, newly hatched fry are fed a diet containing 17 alpha methyltestosterone or a synthetic male hormone for about 21 to 28 days. This induces the development of male characteristics, ensuring an all-male population that grow faster and more uniformly. So that's the sex reversal. Next is the genetic manipulation of sex. With this method, production of all-male tilapia can be attained with the use of YY male technology. For example, in salmon farming, genetically male, the XY or fish can be sex reversed to function as females through hormonal treatment. These new females produce all male offspring YY or XY, which can then be used to create monosex populations without ongoing hormonal treatment. And lastly, the triploidy method or the chromosomal manipulation. This method enhances fish growth for aquaculture by suppressing gonad development in both sexes or halting egg cleavage using cold or heat shock. This delays maturity, allowing faster growth and larger size, improving overall yield for growth out culture. Example for the triploidy method in trout and oyster farming, triploidy is induced by exposing fertilized eggs to temperature shocks, pressure, or chemicals like cytocalasin B. Triploid fish have three sets of chromosomes instead of two, making them sterile and preventing unwanted reproduction while maintaining rapid growth. So here are the other methods under fishes, the traditional straight run method and the modular method. For the traditional straight run method, the straight run method of culture involves rearing fish, particularly milkfish fingerlings, in a grow-out pond from stocking to harvest without transferring them for feeding. This traditional method often allows for 3 to 4 harvests per year within a conventional pond layout. Example, a tilapia farmer stocks 10,000 fingerlings in a pond and harvests them all after 4 to 6 months when the majority reach 500 grams. So, this method is simple and requires less labor, but it may result in uneven fish sizes at harvest due to variations in growth rates. So fish are typically harvested at all once or batch harvesting when most individuals have reached the desired size. Next is the modular method. The modular fish culture system, mainly for milkfish, involves three progressively larger growth out pan compartments or the GOPC, where fish are transferred every 15 to 30 days. The GOPCs follow a 1 is to 2 is to 4 area ratio, ensuring efficient space use. This continuous system allows 6 to 8 harvests annually, yielding over 2 tons per year, making it superior for the straight run method. An example of modular method, a farmer starts with a nursery pond, transferring fingerlings to grow out pan at 50 grams, and later moves them to a final grow out pan for fattening before staggering harvesting. So, the difference between the modular method and traditional method, the modular method, the, the system allows for partial harvesting, where larger fish are harvested first and smaller ones are left grow further, leading to more efficient use of space and resources. However, the traditional straight run method, batch harvesting, when most individuals have reached the desired size. So, the modular method is preferred in commercial aquaculture due to its ability to optimize space, reduce competition, and maintain a steady supply of fish for the market.
In continuation to this presentation, I'll be discussing various culture methods used in mollusk and oyster farming. These methods are crucial for maintaining healthy oyster population and ensuring efficient production. I'll walk you through 7 different techniques that farmers use to cultivate oysters and other invertebrates. We have the hanging method, ring method, stake method, tray method, raft method, and broadcast method. Let's start with the hanging method, which is quite popular in oyster farming. This technique uses materials like rubber strips, plastic ropes, or galvanized iron wire with threaded empty shells. The cultures, the object that attracts oyster larvae, are spaced 10 to 15 centimeters apart on these materials. These cultures are then hung horizontally on bamboo poles, which are tied to bamboo posts arranged in an X design. The posts are typically spaced 1 to 1.5 meters apart, with each couch hanging about 30 to 40 centimeters apart, and this method provides a stable environment for the oysters to grow as they can get enough water flow for feeding while staying protected from the bottom sediments. Next is the ring method, or using rubber strips. This method also uses rubber strips made from old tires. The strips are tied horizontally to bamboo poles and act as a spot collector. Spot are young oysters that attach themselves to the cultures. In this method, the oysters settle on rubber rings. As they grow, they can be harvested more easily. It's a simple yet effective technique, especially in areas where the other methods might not be feasible. The stake method, also known as the Toulouse method, uses bamboo trunks, either whole or split, which are staked into the seabed. Empty oyster shells or even tin cans are attached to these bamboo stakes, spaced about 10 to 15 centimeters apart. This provides additional surface area for the oyster spot to attach to. The stakes are placed in a shallow water not less than 1 meter deep at low tide. The distance between the stakes is maintained at 30 to 40 centimeters to ensure enough space for oysters to grow. This method is very effective in areas with soft or muddy bottoms.
The tray method involves using tray made from bamboo slats, wooden slabs, marine plywood, or plastic. This tray can be as large as 1 meter by 2 meters and are often set down on the soft mud in shallow waters. Some trays come with built-in posts, while others are tied to fixed poles or hang from rafts. While this method is not commonly used for the main culture of oyster, it is useful for separating undersized oysters from the harvested ones, allowing them to grow to marketable size. The raft method is another popular technique for oyster culture. A raft is made from the bamboo poles or lumber supported by floaters such as steel drums or solid styrofoam. This raft can range in size, but for example, a 5 by 5 meter raft can float with just 4 gasoline drums. The oyster cultures, similar to the hanging methods, are hung on the horizontal bamboo poles. This floating structure provides an ideal environment for oysters as it keeps them suspended in the water column, allowing them to feed efficiently while being safe from predators in the bottom mud. Moving on to the broadcast method. This is a much simpler approach and it requires fewer inputs, making it ideal for areas with limited resources. In this method, oysters don't require special facilities for culture. Instead, old oyster shells, iron pieces, rock, and blocks are scattered on the sea or river bottom. These items act as an anchorage for the free-swimming oyster larvae. As the larvae settle, they attach to this surface and grow into mature oysters. After reaching a marketable size, they can be harvested. This method is particularly suitable for areas with firm, sandy, or rocky bottoms, as the larvae will have a solid surface to attach. Each of these methods has its own set of advantages and can be chosen depending on the environment, available resources, and the goal of the farm. Whether it's the efficient use of materials like rubber strips in the ring method or the simplicity of the broadcast method, these techniques are essential for sustainable and productive mollusk farming. These pictures shows the different methods of culture for mollusks and other invertebrates. For the summary of this presentation, we discussed about the types of culture system relative to confinement, species combination, level of production, natural food, and sex of fish. We also tackled other culture methods under fin fishes and the culture of methods for mollusks and other vertebrates, which each method significantly impacts productivity, management, and sustainability. That ends our presentation in culture system and method for fishes and crustaceans under aquaculture and aquatic animal medicine. This presentation is prepared by the Group 1 of 5 DVMB. Thank you.